Today we're going to spend most of our time trying to figure out what's going on with this mountain. The idea behind this mountain, on the x-axis we've got time from the beginning of Wikipedia to the present. On the y-axis we've got number of active editors. This particular slide is choosing editors who've edited more than 10 times in 1 week, but it doesn't much matter what metric you use for measuring number of active editors. You see the same picture, which is until 2007 sometime, we see exponential growth in Wikipedia editors. Since 2007, we've seen linear decay. Now, inside the Wikimedia Foundation, that creates panic, because you project that forward just a few years and you end up with hardly anyone editing Wikipedia, except maybe our colleagues. And so one of the questions is, what's happening here? How important is it? And if it is bad, is there something that we ought to do to fix it? Now, this is one of the 3 vision ideas that are going to underlie this talk, which is the notion of community health as an underlying concept that we look for in online communities. And the idea behind community health as a concept is that we don't just think about things like, are individual members of the community happy? Or does the community make enough money every year? But we think about sort of underlying structural issues in the community that show whether or not the community is doing well and is on a path that makes it likely to continue to do well. The way I'd like you to think about this concept is it's sort of like having a blood pressure meter for an online community. And when the blood pressure tells you that it's 160/220 or something, then you go and start exercising harder, or whatever it is we should do in online communities. And so we want to think about ways of reasoning about that around online communities. Now, these vision pieces, I would say, are long-range goals, or dreams that many of us share and would like to see come true at some distant time in the future. But I want to emphasize, I'm not promising to have solved the things that we're going to demonstrate as vision pieces. They'll just pop up here and there, and we'll talk about them as ideas to pursue. Now, inside of Wikipedia, one of the reasons to be concerned about community health, in addition to the decline in the number of editors, is that there's been a dramatic decline in the number of articles that are created that survive. Most articles that are created these days in Wikipedia get deleted and never recreated again. Here's a picture that might explain why that is from a paper that Tony Lamb did in the Group 2009 conference. And what he's looking at here is, on the x-axis you again have time, and on the y-axis you have the number of people who are coming to a page on Wikipedia as a function of the year in which that page was created. And so what you can see is that more recent articles seem to be on topics that people don't care about as much as older articles. We can get another look at that if we look at what's called the search engine test in Wikipedia. And the idea is, you take the title of an article and you search it on Yahoo, and you see how many hits there are on Yahoo for that article, and that gives you some sense of the amount of people who care about that article. Now, in Wikipedia, the search engine test is a matter of great debate, and in particular, it's not allowed to be the standard by which articles are judged. But nevertheless, it is interesting to note that over time, again on the x-axis, we see that the search engine results of articles by the year the article was created have been declining. It looks like more recent articles in Wikipedia are on less important topics. So this suggests that it might not be a bad thing that there are fewer editors, right? There's not much to do anymore on Wikipedia. All the important articles are already there. Britney Spears has her own article. We're done. There's an analysis that was done by some researchers at Park. This was work led by Bangwan Sa in Wikisim 2009, where he looked at the question of, what if you analyze Wikipedia as an ecological community? And you think about it as this sort of new ecological niche that sprang up, and then populations started filling the ecological niche. Well, what you almost always see in such a community on the top chart is you see exponential growth initially until the niche becomes more and more full, and then you see asymptotic slowdown of that growth. So this is a classic ecological sigmoidal curve fit to the Wikipedia data. And this would predict that Wikipedia would no longer need any more articles ever. But of course, we all know that's wrong because Justin Bieber came along, and it's crucial that he have his own article too. And so in the same paper, Sa and his colleagues proposed a modified ecological niche theory. I mean, it's not new with them. It's from the science of ecology that says what happens if the niche itself is growing a little bit over time. And then you end up with this kind of curve. You have exponential growth for a while, you mostly grow the niche, and then you get growth at the speed that the niche grows. And one of the fascinating things about these theories is that what they predict is as you get close to those asymptotes, you see the wild take over. Nastier and nastier behavior, right? This is, you're almost filling a niche, so lots of things have to be dying in order for there to be room for new things to be born. And one of the hypotheses about what's happening on Wikipedia is that we're near that top, and that's why things are getting so nasty. And as you'll see in a little while, that's why newbies are all getting killed. It's because the old strong beasts living in the niche don't want anybody to come and compete for resources, in this case, room to put encyclopedia articles. So what we would like to do is to reason about community health in this sort of broader context, where we know that Wikipedia does not need to continue growing the number of editors exponentially. There's just not that much new stuff to write. But how fast should it grow? Should it be shrinking? What number of editors would be the right size number of editors for Wikipedia? And I don't know the answer, but that's, I think, a very important question. Now, the backbone of this talk is going to be organized along Priest and Schneiderman's Reader to Leader framework. And I know most of you know how this framework goes, so I'll just give you a quick update on it. The basic idea is that most of the people in any online community are just readers of that community. You'll remember in Priest's earlier work, she argues that those readers are also adding value by helping focus the energy of the community on the things they care about. Some of those readers convert into contributors, where they're individual contributors giving the things that they know and care about to the community. Some of those turn into collaborators, cooperating with other members of the community to get things done. And some few turn into leaders, actually guiding the direction of the community. What we're going to do is, for each of these 4 stages, we're going to look at a couple of examples of what Wikipedia researchers know about what's going on in Wikipedia in those stages. Now, I want to emphasize that in no way am I pretending to say that we understand this whole framework completely, even for Wikipedia. We just have kind of a point here, a point here, and a point here, and we're trying to sort of connect the dots over time. But I think you'll find it fun to look at what we know about each one of those 4 stages and just get a sense of where research is. So the first is a reader. The first paper we're going to look at is a paper that was led by Riedl and published in the Group 2007 conference. And one of the things that he looked at in this paper is the question of what's happening with vandalism in Wikipedia, and in particular, in what ways is vandalism damaging the readers of Wikipedia. Now, this is a complicated graph to read. On the x-axis, we again have time. On the y-axis, we have the probability that an individual who is viewing, a reader of Wikipedia, who is viewing an article, will view that article in a vandalized state. And you notice those probabilities are nice low numbers. So down around July of 2004, the number would have been about 1/10% probability of a vandalized article. And even to the end of this data set, which is going to the end of 2006 approximately, you see that it's still only climbed to about 0.7%. But the terrifying thing about this curve is up through mid-2006, it was growing at almost a perfect exponential growth rate. Now, those of us who live and die with Moore's Law are freaking out about this, right? You don't have to grow exponentially very long, and it matters a lot. The good news is something crazy happened in mid-2006. Anyone know what that was? This was the introduction of widespread bot use on Wikipedia, and the first anti-vandal bots started getting created, which wiped out most of the stupid high school student frat boy vandalism. You know, just putting dirty words into a page, the bots can clean that out really, really fast. And so we saw this huge drop, and then the curve reverted to get a little bit bad again. Now the good news, I don't have published data to show you, but the good news is that vandalism has stayed more or less at the same place. I'll show you later some curves about why that's happening. I think you'll find that fascinating. The next question we're going to ask about with readers is what's going on with all of the women who read Wikipedia and never become contributors to Wikipedia. We're going to look at to what extent is that happening, does that matter, and why it seems to be happening. So overall in Wikipedia, we know that the gender gap is huge. As of the most recent data that we've got complete data on, only about 16% of the editors of Wikipedia who have said their gender are female. Even worse, only about 9% of all the edits on Wikipedia are being done by females. Now, if you look at that over the life cycle of an editor, so here we've grouped editors by the number of edits that they've done on the x-axis, and on the y-axis we show the percent of female editors. I want to emphasize males are here just sort of hidden. They're the converse. They're all the rest of the editors. That's not quite true. There's an almost, there's a tiny fraction of editors who choose a gender other than male or female, but it's so small it's not statistically significant, so I won't report on that in these data. But what we see is the number of editors who make one edit is as high as 20%, but the percentage of female editors declines until once you get to female editors who are serious Wikipedians, people who are doing 500 or 1,000 edits, they're only about 5% or 6% female editors. So this is a particularly scary kind of trend. It suggests not only are hardly any females converting from reader to contributor, but those who do are tending to get driven out from the community for some reason. We don't know from these data why, but we do have this question of, is this just a historical accident that we can just wait for and it'll go away? And the bad news on that is almost certainly not. The evidence is, if you look at the Pew studies on internet use over the last decade or so, what you've seen in just about every domain of internet use, the number of women participants has grown to be equal or even more than the number of men participants. Women use email as much as men. Women use Facebook as much as men. Women blog as much as men. Women play video games as much as men. I should put an aside in that the guys in my lab are skeptical of that last one. And the reason is that the data are kind of interesting. Women do indeed play computer games online as much as men do, but they don't play the crazy intense fanatic games as much. So they'll play Farmville much more, World of Warcraft much less. But in Wikipedia, we don't see anything like that. Here again, we have time on the x-axis. On the y-axis, we have the percent of female editors. And, you know, admittedly, it's getting kind of blurry out on the right-hand side, but it's not getting blurry looking like it's going up. It's just getting blurry. So that's sad. Now, the next question, when we came out with this paper and the news got blogged about, a whole bunch of Wikipedians started responding, and they had two main responses. Main response number one was, who cares? So women aren't editing Wikipedia. We men are carrying the load. We'll keep doing it. Don't worry about it, which was an interesting reaction. Reaction number two was actually from women, and the reaction from women was generally, of course we're not doing Wikipedia. That's because we're doing all the important stuff. Leave us alone. And so what we wanted to answer is the question of, well, does it matter that women are mostly not editing the most important information resource in our world? And here's our way of thinking about this. We took data from MovieLens, where we have some gender data on MovieLens users, and we looked at the extent to which a movie was more male or more female according to the number of males or females who reported that they had seen that movie. So on the x-axis here, you have the maleness or femaleness of a movie expressed in terms of standard deviations. So -1 is a movie that is one standard deviation more male in terms of the number of viewers, and +1 is a movie that's more female. So if we pick a couple examples, here's the movie Monster Ball. This is a movie that's just about average on the gender scale, about equal numbers of males and females see it. And it's about the normal size article on Wikipedia. So on the y-axis, that 1 means an article that's about the normal size of a movie article on Wikipedia. The 1.8 up at the top there, that's an article that's 1.8 times the length of a normal article on Wikipedia. I want to hasten to add, of course, we can't prove that length is quality here, but I can say that all the studies that have been done on quality metrics on Wikipedia articles suggest that length is a very good proxy for quality. So that's the sense in which we're using length here. If we pick Rambo, there's where the movie Rambo goes. It's about 2 standard deviations more male than the average movie. And there's not room on the slide to show how many times longer it is than the average movie. And there's Bridges of Madison County, which is just under 2 standard deviations more female and substantially smaller, shorter article in that regard. So this is our evidence that we think it might matter a great deal. It might be that, again, what I consider one of the most important artifacts in human history is tending to be written mostly by males who, in at least some cases, seem to care about different kinds of things than females do. And the kinds of things that females seem to care about more are therefore apparently getting lower quality articles written about them. Now, the next question is, well, why is this happening? Why is it that females aren't editing Wikipedia? I mean, as some of the males who responded on the blogs, all you have to do is click the button and edit. Anybody could do it. Well, Collier and Baer reported on some work in CSCW 2012. This is Gloria's and my CSCW, so we're very proud of it. That one of the reasons is that the female editors, so all this work is regressions against surveys. So you can take it for what it is. They did detailed surveys, and then they did regressions against them to figure out whether the hypotheses were supported or rejected. And the female editors that they contacted said they don't like conflict, and they found Wikipedia to be a place that has lots of conflict, and that drove them away. They also said that they have less confident, so if you compare the male editors to the female editors tended to have less confidence that they had information that was valuable that they could share with the community. This is actually a fairly robust result from gender studies, that if you take a male and a female of equal ability in something, the male will be much more sure that he's good at it than the female will in general. And this seems to be also affecting Wikipedia editors. And the female contributors feel that Wikipedia is not an environment in which you come to share and collaborate, but it's an environment instead where you come to reject other people's work through reverts. We'll have more to say about that later, but that drives them away. They don't like this kind of framework, the feeling of how the site works. However, they found that contrary to this theory that the female editors are not editing because they don't have enough time, the males were much more likely to report that they didn't have enough time to edit, and that's why they quit editing Wikipedia. And the females were more likely not to mention time constraint as one of the reasons. So what these data taken together suggests to me is that Wikipedia has evolved this kind of framework. You can think of it as a combination of the social and the technological. So the social technological framework in which women don't feel welcome, they don't feel comfortable, and they feel in some cases actively driven away. As a result, we have fewer women editing it. As a result, we have the articles they care about being lower quality. That seems to me really important. And the question for this community, for people with our skills, is, well, what can we do about it, right? We know how to redesign socio-technical communities so they work differently. What would be a Wikipedia that was more welcoming, that worked better for women? To what extent is it the technology, is it the fundamental underpinnings of this revert culture? And to what extent is it just cultural? I say just, not to mean it doesn't matter because it's cultural, but is it cultural so technological isn't the place to find the solution? I think there are some fascinating questions there. Next, we're going to talk about the contributor in our four-part model, and we're going to look at the contributor first by looking at SuggestBot, which is work that Dan Cosley did and first published back in the IUI conference in 2007. So he asked, how do people find stuff to work on in Wikipedia? And one of the ways they did it is they came to this page on Wikipedia, which is called the Needs Work page. And it's a list of all the articles in Wikipedia that have been tagged by someone as needing work. And as you can imagine, it's amazingly daunting. Pick out a random article in here, and most likely you'll have no idea how to contribute to that article. So what Dan did is he built a recommender, actually a suite of 4 recommenders that produced recommendations for editors of articles that were like the articles they had previously been editing, and suggested those articles to them as things that they might want to work on. And the results were fantastic. He found that the intelligent recommendations were much more likely to be acted on than the other recommendations. I mean, for people in my line of work, those of you who are doing, who are measuring operating systems or things may not be used to this, but 4X is really, really exciting. We're usually like 5% better, this is great. So we got just this huge change in behavior with the intelligent recommenders. And it turned out, interestingly though, which recommender didn't matter much. We had a text-based recommender, we had a collaborative filtering recommender, we had a link walking recommender, I guess just 3 types of recommenders, and then we were just picking stuff off the needs work page. And it didn't matter which recommender, they all did about the same and much, much better. This is still live on Wikipedia. It has hundreds of users and continues to be a site of active research. In fact, we've recently been looking at the question of what if we can give people more information about why it is that they're being invited to work on this page. And so on this version of SuggestBot, we've added 2 pieces of information as labeling to the suggestion. The little crowds of people that you see kind of looking like little peoples, those show how many viewers on average come to that page in a given week. And 1 person is not many, 2 people is average, and 3 people is lots. And then the little stars you see over on the right-hand side show you Morton, the PhD student who's running this project now, has built a sophisticated machine learning model that predicts article quality as a function of all sorts of features of the articles. How many citations, how many pictures they have, how many editors, all that kind of stuff. And those are the quality predictions. And what we're interested in is if we show people this information, then how do they put it together in their head to come up with articles they want to work on? You know, what we kind of fantasize that we would see is that they'll look for low quality, high readership articles where they have a chance to really have a big impact. It's too early to tell. We've just launched this recently. But this is the second of our 3 vision pieces for today's talk. I know a lot of people have talked about this, so I won't kill this issue, but I do just want to emphasize that I think too often we as computational people, whether in informatics or computer science or whatever, we get caught into this trap of thinking within a discipline. If we're a systems person, a machine learning person, an AI person, then we're going to get the computer intelligence to solve the problem and the human can just do what we tell it to do. And if we're an HCI person or a social person, then we figure out we're going to build the perfect interface and the human is just going to make all the decisions and be in control. And I think the SuggestBot interface, the new one, is actually an example of a better way to approach these problems, which is to think what kinds of things does the computer do very well, and have the computer do that stuff to make our lives as humans better, and then build interfaces that leverage the things we humans do, think about what kinds of places we want to put our effort in, and give us the control, the ultimate control of the process. There's this famous old joke from artificial intelligence that says that artificial intelligence is the science of having computers do badly what humans do well. And it should be our goal to avoid that, I think, in building these systems. Here's another really important example of that kind of interface. This is the Huggle interface. Huggle is one of the most important cyborgs on Wikipedia. The way Huggle works is a human goes and sits behind Huggle and drives it through Wikipedia. And Huggle looks through the articles that have recently had changes. On the left-hand side there, you can see this list of changes that have happened to articles. And the user picks one of those articles that he or she wants to look at. And when he clicks on that article, then on this right-hand side of the screen, it shows exactly what was changed and gives that user information about the change. Now, there are two interesting things about the way Huggle works. Interesting thing number one is it's got very sophisticated machine learning underneath the covers, picking that list of articles as probable vandalism instances, so that the user's time is really focused on the highest priority stuff. Interesting feature number two is when a user clicks on one of those things, it immediately disappears from the Huggle interface of every other user on Wikipedia at that time, so that you get this kind of automatic sharing of effort going on through Huggle. But the most important thing about this Huggle interface is the big red button with the bang and the triangle in this upper left corner. What that button is about is that's the button that you go and one click, if you're the Huggle user, to say, revert this edit because it was vandalism, tell the user that this was vandalism, and post a warning note on the user's talk page saying you've been caught doing vandalism, don't do it more or we'll ban your account. Now, this makes it really easy for Wikipedia administrators to do all of those things. The problem is some people think it makes it too easy. In particular, you can't read it at all, but in the very upper right of that corner, it tells the Huggle user at what rate she is reverting vandalism, how many reverts per minute. And a lot of Huggle users find this is kind of a fun game. Let me see how many reverts per minute I can go today. Well, think what's happening to the people who are underneath that doing the work if they're really trying to contribute in good faith and this Huggle user is coming along trying to shoot them down like Space Invaders. Right? It creates a very awkward relationship between the people maintaining and protecting the quality of Wikipedia and the people trying to learn to be editors. In fact, this relationship has had an enormous effect on the society of Wikipedia over time. Here again, we have time on the x-axis. On the y-axis, we have the percentage of all reverts that are done by 3 different kinds of agents. The biggest section, about 60% of all the reverts, are still done just by humans on their own reverting things. But almost 40% of reverts now on a day-to-day basis are done either by bots just directly reverting because they're sure something's vandalism, or by people using cyborgs like Huggle, mostly Huggle, to revert things because they think it looks like vandalism after they were guided there by the cyborg. So what that means is that not quite 50%, but that a lot of the interaction that people who are getting reverted have with Wikipedia is no longer with humans. It's now happening either completely with robots or with humans who are kind of doing the work through a robot. And we think that that's dangerous, that over the long term, that's a dramatic change in the culture of Wikipedia. And we think maybe that change is one of the explanations for that mountain that we looked at on that first slide. That if you remember, it was right about the time that the robots became very popular that we saw that dramatic fall off in the number of editors. We'll have more to say about that later in today's talk. Let's move to our third section, the collaborator section. Nicky Couture, when he was at Park, did a really interesting paper that was one of the first looks at the increase in the amount of conflict that was happening in Wikipedia over time. Remember we talked near the beginning of this talk about these ecological models and how one of the predictions of the ecological models is as you get near the asymptote, you're going to start seeing more conflict. Well, Nicky, in this paper, showed that there was a dramatic change in the amount of work that people in Wikipedia were doing that was dealing with coordination tasks or directly with conflict that was happening in the encyclopedia. He showed that from the beginning of Wikipedia, almost all the work on the encyclopedia was direct encyclopedia work. I'm editing the encyclopedia to make it better. To the present, where as much as a third of the work of a Wikipedia is spent just coordinating with other editors, reverting other people's edits, dealing with vandalism, etc. So he built this machine learning model based on a couple dozen features of Wikipedia articles to to try to pick whether a Wikipedia article was going to become in its future a high conflict article. And the idea is, if you could detect the high conflict articles, then you could guide the way people worked on those articles to try to manage the conflict. Now, Nicky would be the first to say, it's not that you want to avoid all conflict. Sometimes conflict is the way you collide over ideas and you come up with, well, what's the best way to frame this problem? But if you can detect the places where conflict spins out of control, where people are just reverting each other back and forth and there doesn't seem to be any sense to it, then maybe you could remove that useless conflict and leave the good, valuable, beneficial conflict. So the machine learning model is producing on the x-axis a prediction of how many controversial revisions this article will have. You can look at the paper for the detailed definition, but basically these are revisions where apparently people are just reverting each other in cycles that look like the beginnings of revert wars. On the y-axis, you have the actual number of controversial revisions. And you can see that there's a blob of articles that aren't very controversial at all, where the model predicts them as not very controversial, but isn't terribly accurate about exactly how not controversial there are. But once you get out of that blob, the model does a pretty good job of predicting controversial articles. Of course, the fun payoff is always, what's the most controversial article as of 2008 in Wikipedia? Any takers? Right, that little dot. Bush. Yeah, that's the Bush article. Now, the next thing that we want to talk about around collaborators is what happens when you pull together a group of people to try to get them to work on an article. Does the group of people that you've pulled together matter in terms of the quality of the work that those people are going to do? So Jilin Chen led a project where we looked at diversity in Wikipedia. Now the motivation here comes from these wisdom of crowds-like arguments that say that if you get a collection of people with diverse inputs, they each bring something different to the table, and so you're going to get more value out of the collaboration. But it doesn't always work that way. This is another group of people that was brought together around a very intense purpose, and sometimes those kinds of groups can spin out of control in ways that we don't predict at the beginning. So here's a quote from a Wikipedia editor about why he was leaving Wikipedia. This was a relatively new editor complaining about the more experienced Wikipedians trying to just force their views on the world. Now, in the diversity literature, there are, broadly speaking, three types of diversity that are generally studied: demographic diversity, informational diversity, and value diversity. In Wikipedia, we can most easily get direct measurements of tenure and interest areas, so we focus on informational diversity. I do think, I'll guess at a question someone's thinking of, I do think it would be fascinating to redo this study with our gender data now that we've got it. We just haven't done it yet. And we did it in the context of wiki projects. Wiki projects are groups of people, typically hundreds of people, who come together to work on something on Wikipedia over time. An example is the wiki project Philosophy. They list a bunch of pages that they care about. They list them in order by the number of views. Remember what we were doing in SuggestBot just a few minutes ago, showing the number of views. And then they have a list of the members of the group. This is just self-selected. You just go and edit yourself into this page to say, I'm a member of Wiki Project Philosophy. And then you can edit some of the pages if you would like to help them out. And what we did is we took a whole bunch of data on about 600 wiki projects, which is all of the wiki projects that we could get data on that appeared to be on a topic. Some of the wiki projects are on things other than topics, like you'll find a wiki project spelling, which is going through the spell check Wikipedia. That wasn't very interesting to us as a place to look at how people were working together. And what we did is, for each one of those projects, we coded them into quarters across all of the years that we had data for. And then we tracked across those quarters the performance of that project. How many edits did they do? and how many people withdrew from the group, left the project. Ultimately, some of the projects, of course, completely fail because everybody leaves, but many of the projects partially fail by some of the people leaving. We built a hierarchical linear model because, of course, all of the quarters within the same project are correlated with each other, and so we had to control for that. Now, those of you who aren't used to reading charts like this, I want to give you a very big caveat before I tell you what the chart means, which is, if I actually plotted all the dots of the data on this chart, it would look mostly like a blob. It would be a blob with a little bit of a curve to it, but mostly a blob. We're finding a trend that is extremely strongly statistically significant, but that is explaining about 5% of the variance in the data. So there are lots of other things that explain why it is that wiki projects don't work together, right? You just get some jerk and so everybody leaves. Well, we weren't studying jerks, so we don't know about that. But we do know about the extent to which diversity predicts it. The x-axis is a normalized measure of tenure diversity, and the curves go exactly across the ranges of tenure diversity we saw in the data. So they're from the beginning of the data to the end of the data. And what we see on the y-axis, at the top figure, we're seeing the amount of work that's being done by the project as a function of diversity. And you can see that as diversity increases, the amount of work increases. The wisdom of the crowds argument supports that. Interestingly, you get to too high diversity, and then you start seeing the amount of work decline a little bit at the top. Member withdrawal, we see a similar picture. As diversity increases, member withdrawal declines, which is a good thing. Fewer people are leaving the group because they find it more interesting, right? It's more fun for me to talk to Mike because I get to hear about things that are different from what I hear about when I talk about with Joe and Lauren, who know exactly, I know exactly what they've been doing the last few years. But once you get beyond a point, then member withdrawal starts increasing quite substantially. And it looks like having a group that has too many people who are quite different from you makes it uncomfortable, and then people leave that group. Now, things are a bit different when we look at interest diversity. With interest diversity, we see almost the same thing with the amount of work, except we never see a diminishing returns game. As diversity increases, work increases. And with withdrawal, likewise, we never see a diminishing returns. As diversity increases, people are less and less likely to withdraw. We, of course, are never sure of why these things are. Even if you ask people, you're not sure, and we haven't even asked people. But what we think is going on here is interest diversity is not as salient in Wikipedia. What I mean by that is, if I go and look at an editor's list of changes, I can pretty quickly find out when he first made an edit. But it's not very easy. I would have to scan all those changes to figure out the range of things that he or she is interested in, and that takes a lot longer. So we think one of the features that the diversity literature suggests is a strong predictor of diversity being divisive is if it's very visible, if it's right in your face. You can't avoid realizing that person's different from me. It's weird, weird, weird. Right? And if that's not happening, then it would be less likely to see that feature. So that suggests that in online groups, you may be able to increase diversity with less of the risk in offline groups, at least where it's less salient. Now, what we think would be really cool next is to take these analytics studies and turn them into something where we figured out what we could build as a tool for the person running a wiki project to make it more effective. Can we recruit people to come to that project who would be particularly valuable contributors? We haven't done that yet. I think that would be really neat. The next thing that we're going to talk about for collaborators working together is some work that Aaron Halfaker led that he presented at WikiSim 2011, and that's called Don't Bite the Newbies. And the idea here is that it's really easy in Wikipedia to do a revert. You just click on that undo button and click one more button and you're done reverting somebody. But the problem with that revert is if you revert a newbie, that newbie with very high probability is never going to come back to Wikipedia again. So is there something that you can do to make that revert more gentle for the newbie? So what Aaron did is he built this model. Here's a revert happening. You have the reverting editor reverted edit, and then the reverted to revision. Don't worry, for this talk you don't have to know all those words too carefully. And then on the x-axis here, we have the editor history. And what we do is we go back and we look at what work this editor was doing on average before the revert happened. And then we look forward the next 3 weeks and we see what's the change in activity to this editor, probably as an effect of this revert. So here's a classic one of the graphs from the paper, and this is probably the hardest graph we're going to read all day, but hang with me. I know it's getting towards the end of the talk, but I can explain this. What's going on here is on the x-axis, we have those 5 weeks that we had on the previous page. Minus 1 week is the week before the revert. 0 week is the week of the revert, and then 3 weeks out into the future. We have a control group of editors who look almost identical to the editors who got reverted, but they didn't happen to get reverted in that week. And what we're looking at is what happens different to the control group from the group that actually got reverted. Now I want to emphasize, this is not an experimental study. We're not reverting people randomly and then seeing what happens. That'd be really cool, but it'd get our Wikipedia account blocked really fast. This is purely an observational study, so it has all of those risks. I may accidentally use causal language. Feel free to throw things at me if I do. Okay, so what happens is, if you're a not reverted editor, after the point, then over time, your probability of being reverted, that's what the y-axis is measuring, your probability of being reverted, climbs over time. Isn't that interesting? So editors who are just editing Wikipedia and not getting reverted, their probability of getting reverted in the future is climbing, which we think means that they're increasingly making riskier and riskier edits over time. By contrast, the editor who did get reverted, that editor sees a big decrease in his probability of getting reverted, and that decrease seems to be relatively persistent for the next 3 weeks into the future. So the important thing here from a community health perspective is that we can't just think of reverts as evil. A revert has a very powerful training effect where it's helping editors understand what kinds of activity in Wikipedia are the activities the community likes, and editors react very strongly to that signal, and then they behave more like Wikipedia community wants them to behave. Yes?
Did you take attrition into account?
Did we take what into account?
Attrition, so that people actually drop out of using Wikipedia?
Yes. In fact, if you look at the overall amount of work that gets done, and measuring work in Wikipedia is extremely tricky, and in the paper we did a very careful job of it. So I'd encourage you to read that to get all of the details. But I'm going to give you enough that you can understand these results. What we did is we looked at how much work did you as an editor contribute to Wikipedia that survived. If you do work and it gets thrown away immediately, we don't care very much about it. But if you do work that lasts a long time, that's the sign that the community is accepting that work. And what we found is, even including the fact that people get driven away by these reverts, we still got more total work done by the group that got reverted than by the group that didn't get reverted. Now again, causality, we have to be very careful about here, but that's a fascinating result, that it seems like that revert, the training effect was so powerful that it actually led to a net benefit to the Wikipedia community. There was another really fascinating result, just to cherry pick from a bunch of results in the paper, which was that what we call the curmudgeon effect, which is the person doing the revert mattered a lot. If you get reverted by an old guy, you're much more likely to do less work and to be driven away from Wikipedia for all time than if you get reverted by a young or middle-aged editor, which we found very interesting. We're not certain why, but we suspect it's because the old Wikipedia editors get grumpy and write grumpier things, especially the old Wikipedia editors who are spending lots of their time doing reverts, because they mostly see bad stuff happening, so they get kind of crabby because of that.
When you say young, you do mean tenure, not actual age?
Yes, tenure. We don't know actual age. Now this is a cool graph that came from the Park Social Cognition blog, and it was from a paper that they wrote in 2009 and published at Wikisim, where they were looking at the question of overall what's going on with Wikipedia. And one of the things they were interested in is what's going on by class of editor. So here we've got, if you see the little key over on the side, we have labels for each one of the bars, and the good news is they are in order, so you don't have to agonize about the colors. So at the very top, we have editors who are making their first edit. Then we have editors who are making edit 2 through 9, 10 through 99, etc. You understand how to read this? And then the y-axis is the probability that your edit is going to be reverted. Now look at that over time. Right? If you're a newbie, your probability of getting reverted is brutal now for that first edit. And if you do get reverted on that first edit, you never come back again. High probability. On the other hand, if you're a very experienced Wikipedian, one of these persons I remember the quote we had a minute ago, who was saying that these Wikipedians just think it's their playground and they should keep it. These people are not getting reverted hardly any more at all than they were back in 2002, 2003, I guess. Now, Tony Lamb, who did the gender study, in that paper also looked at this question of reverts as an explanation of what might be happening with the female editors of Wikipedia. And what he looked at is what happens if your first edit is reverted, or your second to third edit, or your fourth through 7, as a function of whether you're female on the top line or male on the next line down. And what he found is if you're male or female, this is not on the chart, I'm just telling you this from the paper. If you're male or female, once you get reverted, your probability of never editing again goes way, way up. And it goes up by almost the same amount. It's statistically indistinguishable whether it was a male or female who got reverted. But the probability of getting reverted is much higher, 1.5 times higher for females on their first edit than for males. Now, we don't know why this is. That is very surprising and problematic, we think. So what we've been working on is trying to build some tools that help address this problem, that help make Wikipedia a place where reverts don't happen as often, and where when they do happen, they're kinder and gentler. And Aaron Halfaker built this interface called Nice that he presented at Wikisim last year. It's a user interface mod that you can go try out. It's still running live on Wikipedia. And you just install it, and then when you get ready to revert and edit, this is the normal revert page. You push the revert button, get brought to this page. In Aaron's tool, you instead get brought to a page that looks like this. If the person you're getting ready to revert is a newbie, it warns you, don't bite, right? Your action could drive this person away for all time. And then in the little green thing in the lower left, it gives you a message box. And if you type into that message box, it sends a comment directly to the talk page of the editor you reverted. Now, I emphasize that because Wikipedians in the room know that you already get a box where you can send comments to the revision record, but most newbies don't know to look there. This sends it to their talk page, which shows up which they get alerted to in the banner every time they log in. So the idea is it should make it much more visible to them, the explanation of why they got reverted. And we did a field experiment. We got 49 volunteers to use the interface. They ended up reverting on average 10 things each. And what we found was, I'm going to tell you the bottom part of the story first because it's all happy, and then I'll tell you the sad news second. The newbie warning, telling somebody don't bite, you're reverting a newbie, turned out to be very useful. Newbies who were the target of such a revert were much more likely to do more work downstream after the revert. And non-newbies who got reverted, interestingly, saw an increase in their quality. Remember we saw on that revert chart that if you got reverted, you got a big quality increase? If they got reverted by somebody who had the warning, they got an even bigger increase. And that was a surprise to us, and we're not sure why that happened. I'll say a little more about that when I tell you the bad news. So next we're going to go to the top, the people in the message box condition. The people who had the message box, first the good news in the message box, what happened to non-newbies. Non-newbies did more work, more communication, and higher quality after they were reverted by somebody with the message box. Now the unintended consequence. The newbies actually got worse quality if they were reverted by somebody who had a message box. We're not sure why that happened. We've been pouring through the data. We have two hypotheses. Hypothesis number one. We heard anecdotally from some of the editors that when they got the message box and they knew that it was a newbie, they didn't bother writing anything because most newbies are jerks and they never want to see them again anyway. Is that fascinating? So, total unintended consequence. We thought we're warning you about newbies, you'll be nicer, right? No, they saw this as a warning to save energy. There's no point helping this person, they'll go away. So one possibility is that they just did not do the advice that we were hoping they would do, and so that harmed the newbies. The other possibility is, notice that we see the non-newbies get all of these benefits. It's possible that what's happening is that they just wrote better explanations in both cases, and the newbies, even though we were putting it on their user talk page where any Wikipedia person would know to look, the newbies just didn't log in again or didn't look there, and so it didn't have an effect. We don't know. We're still pondering that. Nice, though, is an example of the third of our three vision bullets, which is we think that it's really important for those of us in this community to be thinking about our research in terms of not just analyzing it, theorizing, and understanding things, although that's great, we should be doing that, but also building tools that change how the world works directly. And the reason that I really care about this so deeply is because at CSCW, I can't remember exactly when, about 6 or 7 or so years ago, Don Norman gathered a bunch of us around and was haranguing as he is wont to do. And in this particular harangue, he was haranguing about why Chi and CSCW communities were at risk of becoming irrelevant. And what he said is the problem is if all of the innovation is happening elsewhere, if all the innovation is happening in industry, then we don't matter very much. I mean, if all we are is the people in the dusty old library poring over books and explaining stuff other people are really doing, then we're not going to be important. And he said what we have to do as a community is embrace a style of research that he called synthetic. The type of research where we're building things and putting them out as artifacts in the world, as examples. You know, not necessarily, I mean, not all of us have to found companies around our artifacts, but as things that people can see and use and react to and experience. And that's an example where with NICE, we've got this long thread that we've been chasing of analytic work, ours and other people's, trying to understand the effects of rewords, and then we're finally starting to build tools to try to ameliorate the negative parts of those effects. So we're to the last of our 4 stages. Maybe what we should do, let's take a pause now and do some questions. And if we have lots of questions, we'll just do questions and we won't talk about leaders. And if we run out of energy on questions, then we can look at a few more slides and a couple more studies with leaders. So, questions? Yes?
Well, you're making Wikipedia sound like a club. I come from the Northeast, so the kind of club one would see in the suburbs of northeastern cities, which keep out the members who aren't like them, only in this case the membership is male. And is that simplification warranted? Because it's pretty grim.
Right. So I don't know. I mean, we have evidence of those behaviors happening, of people pushing out people who seem different from them. We also have evidence that in the Wiki project groups of people being happy to be around people who are different on at least interests and tenure axes. Mm-hmm. So I guess I think that the evidence right now suggests it's not quite that simple, but that it does seem that people in Wikipedia have a certain approach to doing things, which is, you know, you put in a edit, if I don't like it, I'm going to revert it immediately and get rid of it, and then you can go to the talk page and discuss it, and then maybe put it back in later. And if you don't like that style of working, they don't care to have you around. They're not interested in discussing, well, is there a more collaborative way we could approach this kind of thing? They don't care. Now, the question is, why has the community evolved that way? Aaron Halfaker, the student who's done a bunch of this work, argues that he thinks that that was not how it originally evolved. He thinks that this is a direct cause of having so much bot activity and so much of the communication that goes to humans now directly run by bots. He thinks that that has caused a decreasing humanity of the discourse, and that that's led to some of this behavior. And he thinks it's not an accident that those two things seem to have happened at a similar time.
One follow-up. You said there is an appreciation for diversity in the wiki projects, but those are people who passed the original screen. So the other people are still excluded. They're insiders now, and so I'm not sure it's comparable. That's all.
I think that's a fair point. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that response evokes a difficulty I had understanding one of your slides, where you were showing that there was, the bots came along, but then you seem to be putting the cyborgs in the same pot as the bots. Whereas I would be just as tempted to put the cyborgs in the same pot as the humans, because it's facilitating human activity and it's enabling the humans to be more human. So, can you really, just put the cyborg? Are you putting the cyborgs and the bots together?
So no, in that graph we intentionally have them in three separate pots. In my words, I did put them together. The reason I put them together in words is because although the cyborgs are in some sense just a big lever letting the humans push harder, the way that they work, most of the communication through the cyborgs is pre-written communication that just comes in a canned template. Bob Kraut has done some work that I haven't shown here about what happens in wiki projects if you use a canned template versus if you have a human type something inviting someone to participate in a project. And he's shown, at least in that context, that the canned templates have a huge negative effect on the way people interact. Now, a good follow-up that I know you're thinking, because we had a conversation earlier, is, well, what the heck, why don't you build a cyborg that lets the humans communicate as humans do, just more efficiently? And in fact, Aaron, when he spent the summer in the Wikimedia Foundation, built some versions of Huggle that he calls Snuggle that are intended to do exactly that, to work kind of like a cyborg, but nicer. And it's too early to know, but preliminary data suggests that that helps.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
So from your data, it's looking as though Wikipedia is becoming more conservative. So the fact that newbies are getting their work reverted, it's not just that the sheer number of articles is being contained, but I'm wondering about the diversity within each article. And I mean, do you have a sense, maybe this is just kind of a general trend in any kind of community for it to become more sort of coalescing and more conservative, sort of more toward the mean?
Right. So to answer the first part of your question, I don't have any within article data. That would require the kind of natural language processing my group doesn't have expertise in. I think that'd be fascinating. Or some qualitative work. I guess you could have humans do it. The question, I do think that Wikipedia is becoming somewhat more conservative in the sense that the deletionist movement, the set of people who like to reject articles, is somewhat in ascendancy these days. They're a little bit stronger. On the other hand, we've looked very closely at some data on that. Ha!
Wow.
And here's data on article mortality rates as a function of the date at which the article was written. And you can see that the article mortality rate has been increasing across time, which suggests increasing conservatism. But, oh crap, I didn't bring the other chart. We've got another way to slice these data, which looks at if you take an article and you do the Yahoo engine test, the Yahoo search engine test, to figure out how many sites there are to that article at the time that it was created. And then you look at surviving Wikipedia articles and you ask, what's the average number of Yahoo sites of a surviving Wikipedia article at the time it was created? You find that number is actually declining. So that means that articles that are surviving today are less notable than articles that survived in the past, on average. And so you know, at least that evidence suggests it's not just a more conservative community. That's more consistent, in my view, with ecological niche closing. There's less and less stuff. We're fighting more and more of it, so more stuff has to get rejected. But the stuff that is surviving is less and less important. We're kind of squeezing up against that asymptote.
Or it could be lower quality. Just lower quality. That's not why it's being cited.
So the Yahoo test isn't checking the Wikipedia citation. It's checking any mention of that article topic in the world. So is this article, is the concept of the article notable? That's the idea. Gary.
Have you looked at any of these things broken down by the kind of article? I'm thinking of, you know, there are things like technical articles, either about, you know, math or science or whatever. There are historical articles, there are sort of current events and so on. These trends hold for all kinds of articles, or are they really more focused on some kinds of articles as opposed to others?
Right, that's a great idea. We have broken down the articles by categories, and we've done a number of analyses by categories, but not these. So I don't have a direct answer, but I love that. Look for it in the paper.
Next time. I'm going to acknowledge him.
That's right, that's a great idea. Yes?
This is probably a technical note. For the studies of decrease in membership in the Wiki project, do you know what sorts of people are leaving? Are the groups becoming more homogeneous? Or are they becoming more heterogeneous because people prefer diversity?
That's a great question. So in CSCW 2012, just a few weeks ago, we had a follow-up to the diversity paper that I showed you just a minute ago, in which we looked at the question of diversity from the perspective of the individual in the group. Right? The data I showed were all about how does the group function as a function of the diversity within the group. In the more recent paper, we asked the question, does your distance from the center of the diversity mass predict whether you're more likely to leave? Absolutely it does. The further you are from the center, the more likely you are to leave the group.
So this is the conservative, the exclusionary club practicing more subtly.
Well, it's possibly that, or it's possibly you guys are all weird.
Yeah.
Right? Our data don't tell you why you're leaving. They just say,
True.
you know, everyone's wearing a tattoo here. This sucks. I'm out.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Good point.
So this is a follow-up to Gary's question of types of articles. I recall at CSCW 2012 that someone said that Wikipedia articles that are traditionally women's topics, I forget which ones, like changing diapers, are actually written by men as opposed to women. So maybe you remember this more and you can elaborate.
Yeah, they absolutely. I think it was a qualitative. I saw the paper. I saw the presentation, and I think it was a qualitative study. And they looked at a bunch of articles on topics that you would expect women to write on: menopause. One of them was a female body part, and I won't try to guess female body parts. But and the presenter was just like, you know, I tried to go in and write something about this female body part that I know, right? And it gets reverted by a man. This is ridiculous. And yeah, so.
You're reminding me, in Soch.Women a long time ago, there was a period when the women withdrew and the men didn't notice. And that's a true story.
Other questions? Yes.
So Jérôme Lanier makes a fun little rant about Wikipedia, where he's saying at some point that internet used to be a place where if you're looking for something, there's usually one person, one geek or one crazy guy who writes something about it, and it's brilliant, it's really good. And now you have Wikipedia, and he says, well, because it's written by so many people at the same time, it becomes really bland, and there's no real sense of wonder in it anymore, and it's not written with a passion. And how do you think that this many cooks argument plays out in terms of the quality of the article and also the number of contributions?
Right. So I don't have research data to that point. I don't know. I don't have a good idea of how to study that. We do have research data, though, from some work that Nikki Couture and Bob Kraut did 2 years ago now, where they looked at the question of the quality of an article as a function of the number of editors. And what they found is that the best predictors of high-quality articles are articles that had few editors early on in their lifespan, creating the backbone to the article, the structure to it, and kind of the initial version. And then, interestingly, many editors late in their life cycle was also a good predictor of quality. But I don't think those data directly speak to your point, because this is a different type of quality. This is accuracy. This is, does it answer the question I might have? Is it readable? Can I follow it? Whereas I think you're asking this question about, does it read as a literary piece? And I would say, again, I'm not talking from research here, I'm totally talking from experience. My opinion is anecdotally, absolutely it gets worse if you have many cooks. You don't get that feel of a voice going through an article. Personally, I don't go to Wikipedia for that. I go to the New Yorker for that. And I go for Wikipedia for facts, and I don't go to the New Yorker for that. Well, what's the sense of the room? Should we declare victory and run for cookies?
Why don't you finish the leader?
Do a couple more? Okay.
Yeah, do the leader.
Okay, so this is, again, on leaders. And this is one of the interesting examples of the impact of leaders on Wikipedia. Again, we have data on the X, and on the Y, we have article mortality. And you can see that when article creation was first restricted to registered users only, you had a huge drop in article mortality because all these anonymous users couldn't create articles anymore, so they didn't have to get deleted. And then you notice that when Jimmy Wales gave his really famous talk at the Wikimania conference one year that said Wikipedia has enough quantity, it's time to close down the quantity floodgates and just focus on quality, you see over the subsequent months there was a big increase in article mortality rate as people started rejecting more stuff because they wanted to focus on quality. Now, there's a really interesting little anecdote about leaders, which the Wikimedia folk just love, which is that very few women survive to become Wikipedian, as I showed you on those earlier charts. However, the women who do survive to get up to 2,000 edits are much more likely than men to become administrators. Now, we're not sure why that is, but what the Wikimedia Foundation likes to say is it's because the women who make it that far are tigers, and they're really strong people. I don't know. Another story about leaders in Wikipedia that I just find fascinating as an anecdote is in 2008, a very famous reporter, a guy who had won a Pulitzer Prize while he was working at the Christian Science Monitor, got captured by the Taliban. Now, a guy in Florida found out about this and posted it to this guy's Wikipedia page. I mean, he was a Pulitzer Prize winner. He had a Wikipedia page. It described his life history, that he'd worked for the Christian Science Monitor, that he now worked for the New York Times. It even said that he was going to win the Pulitzer Prize that year for the Times, which turned out to be true after the fact. The New York Times immediately called Jimmy Wales and asked him to embargo that story. And the reason is they felt that, first of all, if the Taliban knew he had worked for a paper called the Christian Science Monitor, right? Is this the height of irony? Not even really a Christian paper by most people's definition. If they knew he wrote for a paper called that, they'd be really pissed at him. And second, if they knew he was really famous, they would increase the ransom and it would be harder to get him away safely. Jimmy Wales agreed. And for the next 6 months, Wikipedia refused to publish articles about it. They deleted his page, and they put a hold so that no changes could be made to that page, but they put it invisibly. This guy in Florida, every week, would go and try to post new information about this. He was blogging about it. He was posting on Usenet groups. Anywhere he could, he was saying, there's a worldwide conspiracy. People are trying to keep the truth from getting out. This guy's been captured by the Taliban. Won't anyone listen? And then finally, 6 months later, he escaped from the Taliban, and poof, the article shows up. And sure enough, this guy was right. There was a worldwide conspiracy trying to prevent him from getting the news out. And this has been a fascinating topic of discussion on Wikipedia. Is this justified for an encyclopedia to lie about what's going on in the news in order to save this man's life? I won't try to answer that, but it's really interesting to think about. Now, we looked at this question of decisions in Wikipedia in a paper that Tony Lamb again led, where we were looking at how group composition predicts decision quality. And for decision quality, we picked decisions about article deletions for a reason that I'll show you in a minute. Most article deletions are just obvious. Somebody goes and creates an article about his frat and it gets deleted. But some of them are hard to decide. And those ones go to this process that decides whether or not an article should be deleted. So there's a nomination, it's called an AFD, or an Articles for Deletion nomination. This article should be deleted. In this case, the AFD says we already have a category of lighthouses in Spain. We don't need an article that separately lists all the lighthouses in Spain. Then there's a bunch of discussion. In the discussion, people say either delete or keep, and then they give an explanation of why it is that they want it deleted or kept. And then somebody comes along, it has to be an administrator, and makes the decision. And in Wikipedia AFD decisions, it's crucial, as a matter of policy, it is not a vote. You don't just go and count what people have said. You read the discussion and you see if there's a sense of the discussion, and then that's the decision you make. So here's the example in this paper. In this article, you've got some deletes, some keeps, and a administrator reads it and decides that in this case it should be kept eventually. So what we wanted to figure out is, are those decisions good? But how do you know if it was a good decision to delete a page? Even Wikipedians fight about these things. So what we did is we looked for decisions that were reversed on appeal. And in particular, we took all the decisions that went to appeal. We assumed that the results of the appeal process was the one true result. And then we assumed that the earlier result was good if it agreed with the appeal and bad if it disagreed with the appeal. One of the interesting things is looking at how the leaders behave on Wikipedia. So these are administrators on Wikipedia. This is the average probability of making a decision on a not vote. So on the x-axis, you have the percentage of the not votes that are keep or delete. So that's the delete percentage. And on the y-axis, you have the probability of an eventual delete. And this curve is the logistic curve that tells you how administrators on average decide. But the interesting thing is that keep administrators in red are much more likely to keep articles, and delete administrators in green are much more likely to delete articles. How much more likely? Well, let's take a look at an article that's right on the borderline, have 50% keep, delete, not votes. If you get an inclusionist who's in the top 10% of all inclusionists, then he's going to keep that article over 90% of the time. But if you get a deletionist, top 10% deletionist, he's going to delete it 75% of the time. So big swing in probability of decision as a function of who you get as the admin making that decision. But the interesting thing is there's also a big wisdom of crowds argument going on here, which is the group of people who came together to have the discussion is a very strong predictor of the quality of that discussion as measured by whether it's overturned. So here's an example of, here are the dimensions we looked at. The diversity of the group predicts good decisions. Higher diversity groups, more tenure diversity, better decisions. Newcomers participating predicts worse decisions, as you might expect. The group formation is done in an interesting way. People can just come from all over the world and just join and be part of the group. But the person who calls for the delete is also supposed to go recruiting. If that person goes and aggressively recruits among his or her friends, we measured that, then we consider that a biased group formation. Interestingly, that didn't make any difference. Pulling in more people apparently was enough more positive to make up for those people being a little bit biased. On the other hand, a biased admin makes a big difference. If you have a biased admin who makes a decision in the direction of her bias, then that predicts that the decision was more likely to be bad. So the cool thing about all this is we've got a set of tools to predict which decisions are going to be bad in advance as a function of the group of people making the decision. Isn't this awesome? So you can imagine a tool that helps pull in more people to build the decision, and then hopefully that'll help lead to better decisions. So in this talk, we've talked about 3 pieces of vision. We've looked at the idea of community health metrics that measure the overall health of an online community. We've looked at ways that human and computer intelligence can be pulled together, each doing what we each do well. And we've looked at the ways in which synthetic research can really help increase the impact of our research in our community, and maybe as a challenge to us that we should all be thinking about that kind of research. So I appreciate your attention. Thank you very much.